Hi there. I'm Celine. My mom kicked me out of her wedding, her big day, said I wasn't good enough to be part of it. But that wasn't the worst part. Behind the flowers, the fancy dresses, the picture-perfect smiles, they were hiding something bigger. They'd spent years erasing me, not just from the guest list, but from the family, from the future. And when I finally walked away, everything they'd built came crashing down. But here's the thing. When your own mother turns you into the villain of her fairy tale, what choice do you have? You think the wedding was the real drama? Wait until you hear what happened after. It was almost closing time at my flower shop in Charleston when my phone buzzed on the counter. The soft hum of the AC blended with the faint scent of lilies and damp eucalyptus hanging in the air. I was trimming the last bouquet of the day, the kind of peaceful moment I usually enjoyed, until that text shattered everything. Celine, I think it's better if you don't attend the wedding. It's for the best. For a second, I thought I'd misread it. My fingers froze over the stems, my thumb still pressing the shears mid-snap. I blinked, rereading those cold, calculated words from my own mother. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was real. She didn't want me there, on her wedding day. I stared at the screen as if I could will the words to change, but they didn't. They sat there, flat and final, like a verdict handed down in a courtroom I didn't even know I was being tried in. It wasn't the first time my mother, Drusilla, had decided I wasn't good enough. But this was different. This was the final nail. My chest tightened, a slow, dull ache spreading beneath my ribs. I glanced around my tiny shop, where every corner held memories of me holding this family together. And now, they had decided to move forward without me. I set the shears down and leaned against the counter, the weight of the text crashing over me like cold water. Then, as if my mind needed to torture me further, the memory hit. It was a month ago, during one of those early May mornings when the Charleston air smelled like rain and magnolia. I had just finished arranging peonies when my mother walked into the shop, elegant as always, her smile sharp as a knife. She didn't waste time. "Celine, we need to talk," she said, voice tight, eyes avoiding mine. I wiped my hands and waited. "You don't really fit the image we're going for," she continued, tone so polished it cut deeper. "The bridesmaid thing? Maybe it's best you step back." The words sliced through me that day like paper cuts, thin, precise, and somehow more painful because of how politely she delivered them. I'd laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a bad joke, but her face told me it wasn't. Now, a month later, she had made it official. Not only was I not standing beside her, I wasn't welcome at all. I walked slowly to the back of the shop, shutting off the lights one by one, letting the shadows creep in as the sun dipped below the Charleston skyline. My legs felt heavier with each step, my chest tightening as my mind kept replaying that message. How did I get here? How did I become the outsider in my own family? My mind flashed back to the countless nights I stayed up, covering rent when Mom was short, helping my sister Aurelia clean up her messes, taking care of everyone while no one ever thought to check if I was okay. And now, I was nothing more than a liability in their perfect little narrative. My phone buzzed again. Aurelia had posted a photo on Instagram. The perfect family wedding, no drama, just love. The caption sliced deeper than any text. The picture? My mother, Aurelia, and a circle of smiling bridesmaids laughing under Charleston's soft evening glow. I wasn't in it. I wasn't even mentioned. That's when something inside me shifted. Something quiet, heavy, but sharp. I locked the shop, the keys cold against my palm. My footsteps echoed on the pavement as I walked home, every sound amplified in the thick, humid night. By the time I reached my apartment, I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt hollow. Standing in front of my bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection like I was looking at a stranger. My voice cracked the silence when I whispered, "If they've erased me, maybe it's time I erase them too." No more waiting to be invited. No more hoping for crumbs. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing until exhaustion finally dragged me under. The next morning, I woke up to a name I hadn't heard in months lighting up my phone. The name glowing on my phone screen stopped me cold. Junia. I hadn't heard from her in months, not since that last family dinner, where she quietly slid me an extra plate and murmured, "You shouldn't let them treat you like this." She was the only one who ever looked me in the eye when the rest of them pretended I wasn't even there. So when her name popped up at 7 in the morning, I already knew it wasn't good. I answered anyway. "Junia?" Her voice came through, hushed, almost apologetic. "Celine, I didn't want to be the one to say this, but Mom asked me to call you." My stomach dropped. "She wanted me to make sure you don't show up today," Junia continued quickly, as if ripping off a Band-Aid. "She said it's better for everyone's peace." There it was. That phrase again. Peace. As if my existence had ever disturbed theirs, like a storm cloud ruining their sunny little world. I didn't respond right away. I let the words settle in the silence, heavy and sharp. "Message received," I finally said, my voice flat. Junia tried to soften the blow. "Celine, I don't agree with her. You don't deserve this." But I'd already tuned her out. It wasn't about whether I deserved it anymore. They'd made their decision. After the call ended, I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the sunlight slicing through the blinds. Outside, Charleston was stirring awake, church bells ringing, birdsong floating on the breeze, the hum of wedding preparations everywhere. It was supposed to be my mother's perfect day, and apparently it required me to vanish. The walls of my apartment suddenly felt too small, the air too heavy. I grabbed my keys and jacket without thinking, needing to move, to breathe, to not feel the weight of that phone call pressing on my chest. I drove aimlessly through the streets of Charleston, past tourists holding coffee cups, couples in pastel clothes, friends gathering for a celebration I was explicitly uninvited to. Every corner of this city held some memory of me. Every street whispered of the years I spent holding my family's pieces together. And now I wasn't even an afterthought. I don't know what made me do it, but before noon, I found myself parked across the street from the Belmont Hotel, the wedding venue. I had no intention of going inside, but curiosity is a cruel thing. It doesn't let you look away when you should. So I stood there, arms crossed tightly over my chest, and watched. Guests arrived in clusters, laughing, posing for photos. Everyone perfectly dressed, perfectly happy. And then I saw her. My mother. Drusilla moved through the crowd like a queen, her veil pinned perfectly, her smile rehearsed. She was speaking to the hotel manager, but her voice carried across the street, slicing through the morning like glass. "If she sets foot in here, throw her out. She's not family." She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. The words hit harder than I expected, like a punch to the ribs. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching her turn away like I was nothing but a shadow. After a few long minutes, I finally climbed back into my car, the numbness crawling over me like a second skin. I drove without direction, the streets of Charleston blurring past. Hours slipped away without me noticing. By the time the sun began to fall behind the skyline, I found myself at the waterfront. The boardwalk was nearly empty now, a few tourists lingering, the sound of seagulls fading into the breeze. I walked slowly toward the edge of the beach, the tide stretching out like something soft and cruel at the same time. And standing there, with the horizon burning gold in front of me, it finally hit me. They'd spent years carving out their perfect little world, and when I didn't fit their picture, they erased me. Fine. If they wanted me gone, I could disappear. But not on their terms. I took one long breath, letting the ocean air settle deep in my lungs. If they wanted me erased, I whispered to no one, I'll vanish, but on my own terms. That night, back in my apartment, the ache in my chest hadn't disappeared, but it felt different, heavier, sharper. And finally, I reached for the envelope Caspian had left me weeks ago, the one I'd ignored, unopened, because I wasn't ready to face whatever truth it carried. I broke the seal and unfolded the papers inside. And everything changed. I unfolded the envelope with the kind of care you'd give to something fragile, something dangerous. Caspian's handwriting stared back at me, clean, precise, almost clinical. Inside was a copy of a marriage contract. At first glance, it looked like any formal agreement. Typed lines, neat signatures, legal jargon designed to put people to sleep. But as I read, my pulse started to pound in my ears. There it was, buried deep in the clauses. Upon the completion of marriage, all shared assets, including the family estate and financial holdings, would fall solely under the control of Silas Wren, my mother's soon-to-be husband. A quiet breath slipped past my lips. I read it again, slower this time, tracing each word like I was peeling back the skin of a wound. My name wasn't there. Aurelia's name wasn't there. Only theirs, Drusilla and Silas, binding themselves together in a contract that effectively erased both her daughters from the picture. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. This wasn't some emotional fallout or family spat. This was calculated. I leaned back on my sofa, the soft hum of the ceiling fan suddenly too loud in the silence. My mind swirled, images flashing, the cold text from Mom, Aurelia's picture-perfect Instagram post, the public rejection outside the Belmont Hotel. It wasn't personal. It was business. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. I needed air. Pulling on a sweatshirt, I stepped outside into the Charleston night. The humidity clung to my skin like sweat, the streets mostly empty except for the occasional car rolling by. I walked without thinking, down streets I'd memorized over the years, until I reached the little cafe Caspian and I used to meet at after late shifts. That's when the memory hit. 2 weeks before the wedding, I had dropped by Mom's house to deliver floral samples she asked for. She wasn't home, but the front door was unlocked. I'd walked in, placed the samples on the kitchen counter, and noticed the study door slightly ajar. Out of habit, curiosity, or maybe something more, I peeked inside. That's when I saw it. That same marriage contract sitting on Silas's desk. It had caught my eye not because of the thick stack of legal papers, but because my mother's name was there, without mine or Aurelia's anywhere in sight. Back then, I hadn't thought much of it. I was used to being overlooked, but now, standing in the middle of an empty street, it all clicked like dominoes falling. Caspian's voice echoed in my head from a conversation weeks ago when he'd warned me. Celine, Silas did this before. 2 wives, both left with nothing but bills and heartbreak. I hadn't wanted to believe him then. I wanted to believe my mother wouldn't fall for a man who'd used, drained, and discarded women like expired credit cards. But that contract in my hand proved otherwise. I walked home slower than usual, my steps heavy with realization. By the time I reached my apartment, the ache inside me had sharpened into something colder. They didn't just leave me off the guest list. They'd left me off the entire future they were building. One where I didn't exist. Not just emotionally, but legally, financially, permanently. Every little slight, every offhand comment over the years, every time Mom brushed past me in favor of Aurelia, they weren't accidents. They were conditioning. They wanted me gone long before this wedding. The wedding was just the final act. I dropped onto the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling fan slicing the air. They didn't just erase me, they sold me out. Somewhere beneath the dull ache in my chest, something cracked open. Not sadness, not grief. Anger. Real, bone-deep, unshakable anger. For the first time in years, I let it settle in my veins like a spark waiting for flame. This isn't over. The next morning, a new rumor about me started spreading like wildfire, and I knew exactly who lit the match. The rumor spread like wildfire, faster than I expected, but exactly how I should have known it would. By noon, 3 different people had sent me the same message, as if I hadn't already heard it whispered beneath the breath of every family member who smiled too wide and cared too little. Celine's unstable. She threatened to ruin the wedding. She's out of control. It would have been almost funny if it hadn't felt so familiar, the way my family always twisted the truth until it became a weapon. At first, I thought about letting it burn itself out. Let them talk. Let them paint me as the villain. But then Junia texted, "You should come tonight. Rehearsal dinner at the Belmont. Be seen." I stared at the screen, wondering why I should even bother. Why walk straight into the lion's den when I already knew they wanted me mauled? But something inside me, something sharp and stubborn, told me I needed to show up. Not to explain, not to plead, but to remind them I was still standing. That evening, the Belmont was glowing like a Christmas postcard. White lights strung around the columns, waiters gliding between tables with trays of champagne, everything curated to look perfect. I slipped in quietly, unnoticed at first. But eyes always find you when they want you to disappear. Caspian found me near the doorway. He didn't say much, just gave me that look, half warning, half worried. "You sure?" he asked under his breath. "They don't get to write my ending," I replied. The evening unfolded like a play. Laughter where it belonged, fake smiles exchanged like business cards. Until the groom took the microphone. Silas stood tall, smug, one arm casually draped around my mother, like he already owned her. And everything else. "To family," he started, voice honey-sweet. "Those who know when their time is over." The guests laughed, politely, nervously, but his eyes locked on mine when he added, "Some people just don't know when they're no longer needed." The smile never left his lips, but the message hit like a slap. I kept my face still, my hand tight around the glass. Then my mother took the mic. "Every mother dreams of children who bring them joy," she said sweetly. "Sadly, we don't always get what we want." Her eyes didn't leave mine. The room went silent. No one said a word. Caspian leaned in. "They're trying to break you tonight," he whispered. I set my glass down carefully and stood. The chatter faded. Forks paused midair. I walked toward the exit without looking back, until I did. My voice stayed calm even. "Be careful," I said, meeting both their eyes. "Even shadows have limits." And then I left. Outside, Charleston felt like a different world. The hum of traffic, the quiet pulse of life moving forward like nothing had happened inside that ballroom. I kept walking, letting the air cool the weight pressing on my chest. At the corner, beneath the street lamp glow, I stopped and breathed it all in. That night, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, something inside me shifted. The next move would be mine. And this time, I wouldn't play nice. 3 days before the wedding, my phone lit up before sunrise. The city outside my window was still dark, the air heavy with the kind of stillness that only comes right before something terrible happens. When I reached for the phone, half expecting another empty apology or a cold demand, I found Caspian's name instead. His message was short. "Aurelia's telling people you're trying to ruin the wedding." I sat up, the weight of those words sinking straight to my stomach like a stone. Of course she was. It wasn't enough to exclude me. Now they needed to burn my name, too. I stared at the screen, rereading the message over and over as if it would suddenly make sense. It didn't. By mid-morning, I saw the evidence for myself. 2 posts, subtle but clear enough if you knew how to read between the lines. One from one of Aurelia's friends. "Some people really can't stand seeing others happy." Another from a distant cousin. "Family drama is exhausting. Let people celebrate without your baggage." I didn't need a name tagged to know who they meant. I spent the next hour pacing the length of my living room, the same sentence rattling in my head like static. "She's telling everyone you're trying to ruin the wedding." It was the final push. Not Mom, not Silas. Aurelia. The person I thought would at least hesitate before driving the knife in. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed her number. She picked up after the second ring. "Celine," Aurelia said, voice cool like the static buzz of a radio signal I'd forgotten how to tune. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, skipping past the small talk, my throat tight with something dangerously close to grief. She didn't miss a beat. "You're jealous, Celine. You always have been." I blinked, the words slicing sharper than I expected. You hate seeing Mom happy, she continued, like she'd been rehearsing the line for weeks. You can't stand not being the center of attention. The laugh that escaped me wasn't soft. It was bitter, hollow. You really believe that? You can't help yourself, she said. You live for chaos. I swallowed the lump forming at the back of my throat, my hand tightening around the edge of the kitchen counter. She meant every word. She wasn't saying it to provoke me. She genuinely believed I was the villain in her story. We ended the call without resolution, her voice turning cold, mine turning to ice. That evening, after I closed the shop and the streets began to empty, my phone buzzed again. Aurelia, one message this time, no flourish, no pretense. If you really love Mom, you won't show up. Don't ruin her day. I stared at it longer than I should have, the words sinking into my bones like frostbite. If you really love Mom, as if love meant stepping aside quietly while they erased me. I set the phone down, walked to the window, and watched the city lights flicker in the distance. I'd spent years making myself smaller so they could feel big. I'd spent even longer hoping they'd eventually see me. But this wasn't misunderstanding anymore. It was strategy. I walked back to the counter, picked up my phone, and typed slowly, deliberately. If you keep pushing me out, don't be surprised when I stop staying quiet. I hit send and set the phone face down. Tomorrow, they'd understand what it meant when the quiet one finally spoke. The cafe was quiet when I arrived the next morning. One of those downtown places tucked between old brick buildings, smelling faintly of espresso and polished wood. The kind of place where no one paid attention to you unless you asked for it. Caspian was already there, seated at a corner table, a manila folder resting on the table like a loaded weapon. He glanced up when I walked in, and without a word, slid the folder toward me as I sat down. I pulled it open, expecting receipts or half-hearted gossip. But it wasn't that. Inside were copies of documents I hadn't seen before, detailed records, a full copy of the marriage contract I'd first glimpsed weeks ago, but this time annotated, highlighted. And stapled neatly behind it were bank statements, court records, legal filings, a trail of Silas's past, 2 former marriages, 2 women left in financial ruin, assets transferred quietly, systematically. I scanned the pages, my heart pounding faster with every line I read. My mother's name, the date of the wedding, the clause that effectively gave Silas control of everything, including what should have been mine and Aurelia's inheritance. When I looked up, Caspian was watching me carefully, his hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "Why are you doing this?" I asked quietly. He exhaled slowly. "Because someone should have protected you a long time ago." I swallowed, unsure how to carry the weight of that simple truth. "You've spent your whole life cleaning up their mess," Caspian continued. "Maybe it's time to clean your own slate." The words settled over me like an anchor, heavy, grounding. For years, I'd been the one who showed up, the one who fixed things, the one who swallowed her pride so everyone else could save face. Maybe it was time to stop playing that part. I folded the folder closed carefully, like sealing something fragile, and stood. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. He nodded once. "Whatever you do next, don't do it for them. Do it for you." I left the cafe and walked back to my apartment, the folder clutched tight in my hands. The sun was high by then, the streets humming with people preparing for the wedding weekend. Delivery trucks, florists, caterers rushing in and out of venues. Charleston was dressing itself up for a show I was never supposed to be in. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at the screen for a long time. And then, without hesitation, I picked up the phone and called my family's lawyer. It took 3 rings before he answered, his voice formal but polite. "Celine? What can I do for you?" I told him everything. I sent him the documents Caspian had gathered, every highlighted line, every damning clause. I explained the pattern, the way it had happened before, the way it was happening again. When I finished, there was a long pause on the line. "You understand what you're asking me to do," he said carefully. I do. You're aware this could tear your family apart? I almost laughed. That ship had sailed a long time ago. I want this marriage stopped, I said calmly, and I want them to know exactly why. The lawyer hesitated. I can prepare an injunction, but it will cause a public scene. Good. Let it be public. Let the truth crawl out into the light. Before we ended the call, I added one last thing. Make sure they can't erase me this time. That night, I slept differently. Not well, but with a strange kind of calm, like something inside me had finally settled. The next day, as the guests arrived in their finest clothes, the first cracks in their perfect day started to show. By noon, the Belmont Hotel looked like something out of a Southern wedding magazine. Pristine white arches, silk ribbons fluttering in the breeze, and guests arriving in their finest clothes, sipping champagne, as if nothing in the world could possibly go wrong. But I knew better. From the window of the cafe across the street, I watched them arrive. Uncles in pressed suits, cousins in pastel dresses, old family friends lining up to witness the show. They had no idea the curtain was about to fall. Inside the hotel ballroom, my mother stood radiant under the chandelier light, veil pinned perfectly, lips stretched into a smile wide enough to crack. Silas stood beside her, smug and polished as ever, one hand resting possessively on her back. The picture of happiness, if you didn't look too close. Somewhere behind them, Caspian lingered near the back of the room, his posture casual, but his gaze sharp, scanning every corner like he was waiting for the sky to cave in. It didn't take long. The first sign came in the form of two men in dark suits slipping past the crowd, moving straight toward the front. I saw the shift ripple across the room, whispers, heads turning, the tension sharp enough to slice through silk. One of the men, our family lawyer, approached my mother, leaning in close enough that only she and Silas could hear. The smile slid right off her face. Silas's jaw clenched so hard, I could see it from across the street. The announcement came minutes later. The wedding ceremony had been temporarily delayed due to unforeseen legal circumstances. I almost laughed at how politely they phrased it, as if this wasn't a bomb dropped in the middle of their perfect day. The whispers spread like wildfire. By the time I crossed the street and slipped quietly into the hotel lobby, the ballroom was already unraveling. Guests shuffled uneasily, murmuring behind cupped hands. Phones were out, messages flying faster than the waitstaff could refill the champagne, and then the doors to the side hallway burst open. Silas stormed in, his face red, voice rising over the chaos. "This is her!" he shouted, pointing toward me like I was a criminal on trial. "She planted this! This is her revenge." Eyes turned toward me like floodlights. I didn't flinch. I met his gaze evenly, the calm in my chest unfamiliar but steady. People were recording now. I could see the glint of phones held up like shields, capturing every moment. Aurelia's voice came next, sharp and brittle over the crowd noise. She wasn't even in the room. It was a voicemail buzzing on my phone seconds after Silas's outburst. "You ruined everything," she snapped. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed the only family you had left." I listened to it twice, letting the words wash over me like cold rain. The thing about blame is that it always finds the easiest target. Junia's message came not long after. "They're all blaming you," she wrote, "but you did the right thing." Somewhere deep inside, I wanted to believe her. But in that moment, standing in the middle of the wreckage, all I felt was exhaustion. I thought it was over. I thought the worst had passed. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement at the front of the room. My mother had grabbed the microphone. The air in the ballroom felt heavier the moment my mother's fingers wrapped around the microphone. Her smile was gone, her posture stiff. It wasn't the poised, gracious host everyone had seen earlier. It was a woman unraveling, thread by thread, in front of an audience too stunned to look away. I stood frozen near the back, breath caught halfway in my throat. She cleared her throat, voice slicing through the nervous murmurs like broken glass. "You all came here today," she began, her tone shaking but forced into something sweet, "to witness love, to celebrate new beginnings. Some people nodded politely, unsure where this was going. But what no one tells you, she continued, voice rising, is that family isn't always what it looks like in pictures. A pause, a shift. Her gaze snapped to me across the room, sharp as a blade. From the moment she was born, my mother said, her voice cracking but clear, Celine has been nothing but a burden. The words hit harder than I expected, like someone had knocked the wind clean out of me. The entire ballroom fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop between the gasps and uncomfortable shuffling. For a moment, I swore the chandelier above us flickered, like even the lights couldn't stand what was happening. Somewhere near the front, Caspian's jaw tightened. Junia stood frozen, her phone forgotten in her hand. I could feel everyone's eyes shift to me. The invisible daughter, the problem child, now painted plainly for all to see. I don't know how long I stood there, my heart pounding loud in my ears, before something inside me snapped. Not in anger, not even in sadness, just finality. I took a breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked slowly, deliberately, toward the front of the room. The crowd parted like water. When I reached the edge of the dance floor, I looked up at my mother, who still clutched the microphone like it was the only thing holding her up. "You wanted me erased?" I said, my voice steady, clear. "Congratulations!" I stepped back, sweeping my gaze across the stunned, whispering guests. "I'm gone." Without waiting for her reply, without so much as a glance toward Silas or Aurelia, I turned and walked away. The sound of my heels on the marble echoed louder than the shocked silence. Outside, the Charleston sun had begun to sink, the sky awash in amber and lavender streaks. The evening breeze wrapped around me like a promise of something better. By the time I reached the street, I heard the commotion behind me, more shouting, more chaos. But none of it mattered anymore. Later that night, I heard the rest through text messages and voicemails I didn't bother answering. Silas had left immediately after the ceremony collapsed, vanishing without a trace, taking with him whatever was left of their carefully curated fairy tale. The guests had scattered, many of them whispering about betrayal, scandal, bad blood. My mother's phone, according to Junia, had been ringing nonstop with reporters, relatives, friends who suddenly didn't want to be associated with the disaster. Aurelia didn't reach out, not a word, not even another blame-laced voicemail. Everything they'd built, the image, the performance, the illusion, crumbled in one afternoon. And I'd walked away from the wreckage without looking back. Weeks later, I received one last message, and it wasn't from the person I expected. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the message came. The sky over Charleston was gray that day, heavy with the kind of spring rain that threatened but never quite fell. I was sorting through invoices at my desk, half listening to a podcast playing low in the background, when my phone buzzed against the wooden surface. It was from Aurelia. I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening it. "Mom's not doing well. She keeps talking about you." That was all it said. No apology, no anger, no punctuation. Just a sentence hanging like an unfinished thought. I set the phone down and leaned back, feeling the weight of those words settle in my chest like wet sand. For weeks after the wedding collapsed, I hadn't heard a thing from either of them. I thought that silence was the end. Apparently, it wasn't. That evening, I met Caspian at a small bar near the waterfront. He slid into the booth across from me, a file tucked beneath his arm. Without a word, he passed it over. Inside was a USB drive and a short printed transcript. "One of the old housekeepers sent this to me," he explained quietly. "She thought you should know." I plugged the drive into my laptop when I got home. The recording wasn't long, just under 3 minutes, but it felt like a punch to the stomach. My mother's voice, unmistakable, cold as ice, even on tape. "Celine's unstable. She ruins everything she touches. That's why I had to keep her away." The same lie, the same cruel branding, only this time spoken casually, to someone she thought didn't matter. That's where it started. The whispers, the rumors, the unspoken explanation that made it easier for people to justify my absence at every family gathering, every milestone. Not because I was difficult, but because it was easier to believe I was broken. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dim light, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It didn't destroy me. It just made everything make sense. A few days later, I drove out to the old neighborhood, past streets that used to feel like home. I parked a block away from my mother's building, stepped out, and stood there for a long time, staring at the front door I'd walked through 1,000 times before. But I didn't go in. There was nothing left to say. Somewhere between the betrayal and the lies, and the years of bending myself into shapes that would never be enough, I'd finally stopped needing her to see me. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Sometimes, it just means letting yourself live again. Before I left, I pulled out my phone and typed one last message. I hope one day you can be happy without needing to hurt me first. I didn't wait for a reply. Weeks passed. The city moved on, the gossip faded, the scandal became old news, and I started over. I reopened my flower shop, smaller this time, tucked into a quieter street, where the customers came not because of who I used to be, but because of what I could offer now. Caspian stopped by often, usually with coffee. Junia sent pictures of her kids, messages filled with laughter and updates. A different kind of family. One I chose. Some wounds don't heal perfectly, but they stop bleeding eventually. That evening, as I locked up the shop and stepped outside into the cool Charleston night, I smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because I finally knew it didn't have to be. For so long, I believed that family meant sacrificing yourself to keep the peace, that if I bent far enough, stayed quiet long enough, maybe one day they'd finally see me. But here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes, family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when the room is empty, who listens without expecting you to shrink yourself to fit their story. Walking away wasn't easy. It never is. But peace doesn't come from waiting for people who keep proving they don't value you. It comes from finally valuing yourself. And now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever stayed too long in a place, a relationship, a family that kept asking you to be less just so they could feel more? What would happen if, for once, you chose yourself? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story made you stop and think about your own boundaries. Or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story traveled. And if this story wasn't for you, that's okay too. Let me know why. Your voice matters here. And if you want to hear more real stories about family, love, loss, and finding yourself again, hit that subscribe button and join this little community we're building. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to find a place where we belong.
From now on, this is your new home. Sadly, we don't need someone who's sick. That's what I was told suddenly, and before I knew it, I was taken by car to my aunt's house. It was then that I learned my father decided he wouldn't pay for my medical expenses because he wanted to use the money for my sister's study abroad. I was in shock and couldn't say anything, but my aunt welcomed me warmly. She said, "Maria, won't you become my child?" And from that day, I started a new life as her and my uncle's child. Now, 12 years have passed. My name is Maria, and I have 2 sets of parents. One I don't like, but the other I respect and love. You might wonder why I have 2 sets of parents. It's because my illness created problems in my family. Since I was little, I've had seizures that nobody could explain, and I needed constant care. Medicine helped some, but stress and tiredness made the seizures worse, so my parents always told me not to do any physical activity. In school, I watched from the sidelines during gym class and couldn't play with my friends like everyone else. On the other hand, my younger sister Evelyn, who's 5 years younger than me, was full of energy and talent. Our parents had high hopes for her, especially in football. She joined a well-known mini football club in elementary school, and her skills grew fast. Later, she joined a famous sports club, and she was always one of the top players, even leading the team during practice and games. Watching her made me feel proud, but also a bit jealous. During this time, my parents started treating Evelyn and me very differently. Evelyn got healthy, homemade meals, but I mostly got simple food like bread and instant soup, and sometimes I ate her leftovers. She wore nice, fashionable clothes, while I was given hand-me-downs. For birthdays, Christmas, and school achievements, Evelyn was celebrated, but I was often overlooked. This unfair treatment became a part of my daily life. My sweet sister, always happy, would ask me, "Big sister, won't you play football with me?" She'd hold the ball, her eyes shining. But I always had to say, "Sorry, I can't do intense exercise." I answered reluctantly. Evelyn looked up at the sky, thinking, then suddenly smiled and said, "We can at least pass the ball, right?" She held out the football to me. I thought I could handle just passing the ball, but my parents disagreed. My mom, especially, was very strict. Just as I was about to take the ball, she pushed my hand away and yelled, "Maria, you never know when you might have a seizure, so don't do anything." Evelyn froze in place, startled by her shouting. The ball fell to the ground and slowly rolled away. My mom picked it up, smiled at Evelyn, and said, "Evelyn, let's practice passing together." She glanced at me before walking away with Evelyn, talking kindly to her. After they left, I felt really sad and frustrated, and I cried alone. One event I can't forget happened when I was in my first year of middle school, and Evelyn was in third grade. It was a spring day, and I wasn't feeling well, so I stayed in bed. My parents left to attend Evelyn's important football game, leaving me alone at home. I knew that when I wasn't feeling well, I was more likely to have a seizure, and being alone made me anxious. The stress built up, and by noon, I had a severe seizure. Realizing the danger, I called an ambulance. When I woke up, I was lying in a hospital bed. A nurse came to check on me and smiled, saying, "You're in the hospital. Do you understand?" I nodded, looking around the room, but my family wasn't there. "Has my family come to visit?" I asked. The nurse replied, "Your family is scheduled to come tomorrow morning. You'll be alone tonight." This confirmed that my parents and sister hadn't returned from the football trip yet. I thought to myself, even after being taken by ambulance, no one is worried about me. It's like I'm not even part of the family, just a burden. Tears filled my eyes, and I covered my head with a blanket, crying quietly. After that incident, my parents, facing criticism from the neighbors, started leaving me at my aunt's house more often. My dad's sister is my aunt. She and my uncle work at a game development company, and since they didn't have kids, they always enjoyed having me over. "It's fun having Maria around. It feels like we have our own child," my aunt would say. They both loved games and often taught me about their favorites, so I always looked forward to visiting them. One of the games they made together was set in a fantasy world and was so fun that I could play it for hours. At their house, I ate the same delicious meals they did. My aunt was an amazing cook, and I often asked for seconds. She'd also say, "I've always wanted to pick out children's clothes," and happily chose clothes for me. Going to their house became my safe place, where I felt loved and cared for. One day, as my first year of junior high was ending and summer vacation was near, my dad took me to my aunt's house. The car was packed with my things, and I was excited to spend the summer there. After we arrived and unloaded my stuff, my dad, in an unusually good mood, came inside. But my aunt looked worried, and I started feeling anxious. My relationship with my dad wasn't great, so I didn't ask him what was going on. As I tried to figure out the situation, my dad spread his arms and said cheerfully, "Look, from now on, this is your new home. We don't need a sick person anymore." I was shocked. My dad seemed happy, even though my aunt and other relatives were angry. My parents didn't seem to care. Their minds were focused on my sister's football scholarship abroad. To pay for her studies, they decided they wouldn't cover my medical expenses anymore. No matter how hard my aunt and uncle tried to convince them otherwise, my parents didn't listen. Then my aunt firmly said, "If you stop her treatment, I will take Maria in." My parents quickly agreed. That's how I found out they had given up on me. I was speechless and in shock. My aunt spoke to me gently, saying, "Your dad said you wanted to leave home too, which is why I agreed. But it looks like you weren't told anything. There's still time to fix this. You should talk to your parents and sort this out." but it felt too late to fix things with my parents. I couldn't see them as family anymore. I shook my head and looked at my aunt. If it's okay with you, Auntie, I want to stay here. Maria, I promise, she said. I promise I won't be a burden. I'll help around the house, so please let me stay. I stood up slowly and begged my aunt. If I had to leave, I'd have nowhere else to go. I want to live here with you, Auntie. Please, I pleaded, my voice shaking. My aunt and uncle exchanged confused looks, and I felt anxious, my body trembling. Then, my aunt gently stroked my head and said, Maria, won't you become our child? I looked up and saw both of them smiling warmly at me. Yes, please, I replied, tears of relief streaming down my face. My aunt, with tears in her eyes, hugged me tightly, and my uncle wiped his tears as he watched over us. From that day, I became their child. Eventually, we went through a special adoption process, and I legally became their daughter. Thanks to them, I was able to participate in gym class and enjoy playing with my friends. My health improved, and I rarely worried about my illness anymore. Living with my aunt and uncle made me truly happy. Later, I started competing in trading card games, and even though there was a risk of seizures, they never stopped me. They supported me and let me focus on the competition. I developed a strong desire to repay them one day. When I entered high school, I joined the trading card club, which was well known in the competitive card game world. I was excited to grow and show my skills. In my second year, I won the national championship, beating out prestigious schools. I was so happy that I ran home to share the news with my aunt and uncle. By that time, my seizures had almost completely stopped. Before graduating, a doctor told me that my illness was completely healed, and I was as healthy as my sister. After high school, I continued competing, and my aunt and uncle always supported me, celebrating my success as if it were their own. I started achieving stable, good results, and by the time I was 22, I was recognized as one of the top players. Now, at 24, I'm known as the queen of trading cards. It has been about 12 years since my aunt and uncle took me in. I feel like it's time to give something back to them. Christmas is coming up, and I want to do something special to make them happy. I started making plans as I walked home, feeling the cold winter air. I noticed some unfamiliar shoes at the entrance. I'm home. Is someone here? I asked as I walked into the house. In the living room, there was a high school girl sitting on the sofa, and my aunt greeted me. Welcome back, she said. Who is this girl? I asked without thinking. She looked familiar. Then it hit me, Evelyn? Maria? I heard her voice. She had grown so much that I didn't recognize her at first, but I could still see the traces of her younger self. When I called her name, her face twisted, and she started crying. Maria, you remembered me. I'm so glad, she said. Yes, of course. What's going on? I asked, confused. My aunt started to explain. Evelyn ran away from home, she said. What? I said, looking at my sister in surprise. Evelyn nodded, wiping her tears. Ran away? What do you mean? I asked. Evelyn's voice trembled as she said, Maria, help me. She then began to explain what had been happening at home. When our dad forced me to leave, it had been a huge shock for Evelyn. She had begged our parents, crying, I'll quit football, just let Big Sis come home. But our father scolded her harshly. What are you saying? All of this was for your football. You can't give up now. I won't let you quit. You're your mother's only child, and you need to work hard and become a great player, my mother said coldly, ignoring Evelyn's feelings. Our parents had controlled Evelyn's life, making her focus on football, even though she didn't want to. This had been happening since she was little, and it continued all the way through high school. Finally, during a career counseling session, Evelyn found the courage to say she wanted to quit football. Our parents were furious. My father yelled, Do you know how much money we've spent on you? Your sister sacrificed for you. You're not allowed to stop until you go pro. Feeling trapped, Evelyn ran away to our aunt's house. I had no idea you were going through all of this, Evelyn, I said, completely at a loss for words. While I had been living freely with my aunt and uncle, my sister had been forced into a life she didn't want. Evelyn, you've been through so much. I didn't know anything. I'm sorry, I said. But Evelyn quickly shook her head in surprise. No, you've been through so much for me, and now I'm asking for help. I'm really sorry, she said, looking down. Her small shoulders trembled. Don't worry about it. I'm really happy you came here, I replied with a smile. My aunt and uncle nodded in agreement. That's right, my aunt said. It was good to get away from them, Evelyn. Relax. Your big sister will protect you now. Even though I said it, deep down I felt scared and hesitant to get involved. I wanted to help Evelyn, but I wasn't sure how to do it. I started making a plan. The day I decided to put my plan into action was Christmas, a cold day with a sky that looked like it might snow. After 12 years, I returned to my parents' house, gathering all my courage. I rang the doorbell. The door swung open, and my parents greeted me with, "Welcome back." "Oh, we've been waiting for you," my dad said. They both had overly bright smiles, which felt strange. They must have heard I was coming from my aunt. They should have known it was about Evelyn. "Waiting? What are you talking about after you threw me out?" I asked, feeling confused by their friendly attitude. My mom, in a sweet but fake voice, took my hand and said, "Come on, it's cold. Let's go inside." "No, I'm fine here. I'm busy and can't stay long," I replied quickly. Their smiles faded for a moment, but they quickly forced them back and began talking loudly in a strange way. "The queen of the trading card world, huh? Your dad is so proud of you." "Me too. You've won so much prize money." "I've been bragging about it to everyone," my mom said. I was getting annoyed by their behavior, so I calmly responded, "Why? Because a family should be together, right?" My dad answered. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How dare they say that after abandoning me? I felt angry inside, but they didn't seem to notice. They kept trying to sweet-talk me. "Your mom cleaned up your room when she heard you were coming back. We hope you can relax here," they said. "We even replaced the carpet in your room, so you can practice at home. Feel free to ask us for anything." As they continued talking, it became clear to me. These people weren't really interested in me. They were just using my success to show off to the neighbors. They had created a fake story about how they supported me as a top trading card player, just to boast. Sending Evelyn abroad for football wasn't about her either, it was all for appearances. I watched my parents with a sarcastic smile. "It's truly pathetic how selfish you are. Your efforts are pointless. Actually, I'm planning to quit competitive trading card gaming in a few years." "What?" My parents were shocked. My dad didn't know what to say, and my mom looked stunned. "Competitive card gaming requires quick reflexes, focus, and physical stamina," I continued. "I can't keep up with younger players forever. I'll retire after winning a bit more prize money." I spoke cheerfully, but my parents were clearly upset. "So, what will you do after you retire?" my dad asked. "Well, I might be unemployed for a while," I said with a smile, watching their reactions. The fake smiles vanished, and they looked angry. "Unemployed? Without a real job? Do you know how embarrassing that would be for me at work?" my dad exclaimed. "Exactly. So, you can forget about me." "I never planned on coming back here anyway," I replied calmly. "You're so disrespectful," my dad shouted, his voice echoing in the quiet neighborhood. My mom looked around, worried about the neighbors hearing him. "I came here to talk about Evelyn. She's living safely with me at our aunt's house now," I said. "What? Did you kidnap her? That's unforgivable. Give her back to her mother." My mom suddenly acted like a victim. I looked her in the eye and said firmly, "No, I'm not giving her back. I'll take care of my sister." "What are you talking about?" "I'll call the police," they shouted, clearly upset. I stayed calm and responded, "I've already talked to the police and reported the situation to child services. I've also consulted a lawyer. You're the ones in the wrong here." "What? What are you saying?" my dad asked. "I've been talking to professionals to make sure Evelyn is safe. Since she's 19 now, she has the legal right to decide where she lives. She left home to escape your control, and there's no legal issue with her choosing to live with me." I stood my ground confidently, knowing I had the law on my side. "Staying with you only brings us misery. My sister and I aren't tools for you to show off." Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a neighbor stepping outside, probably hearing the argument and wanting to see what is happening. I decided to use the moment to make a point. Everyone, these people stopped my medical treatment just to send my sister abroad for football. If my aunt and uncle hadn't taken me in, I might not even be alive today. I shouted as loud as I could. Oh, wait, what are you saying? Ignoring my panicked mother, I raised my voice even more. You forced Evelyn to become a football player just for your own pride, sacrificing her childhood. Quiet down, my father's face turned red with anger, and he reached out to grab me. But I shook off his hand and kept going. What kind of parents are you? Saying you won't let her quit until she becomes a professional player? You only see your kids as tools. Neither Evelyn nor I will ever come back here. If you try to interfere, I'll call the police. Just so you know, I'm ready to sue. That's why I came today. I stared at my parents with a firm look. They looked uncomfortable, their faces twisted as they struggled to respond. I noticed many neighbors watching our argument from their windows and yards, looking surprised and concerned. I promised myself I would never come back here again, and with that, I confidently left the house. Years passed, and 10 years later, when I turned 32, I decided to retire from competitive trading card gaming. I originally planned to retire at 27, but I put my life on hold to take care of Evelyn. Because of the intense training she went through as a child, Evelyn developed a knee injury. This forced her to give up her dream of becoming a professional football player, so she set a new goal to become a physical therapist. After a year of prep school, Evelyn moved on to vocational school. During that time, I learned just how much she had suffered under our parents. I hadn't fully realized it until she came to me for help. To make up for the past, I decided to support her education. Eventually, Evelyn graduated from vocational school and became a licensed physical therapist. Now, she's dedicated to helping athletes. Every time we meet, she cheerfully says, "One day, I'll repay you, Maria," her face full of energy and happiness. My name is Rachel, and I'm 37 years old. I'm happily married to my wonderful husband, Paul. We live a peaceful and happy life with our 2 children, our son Andrew, who is 8, and our daughter Emma, who is 5. Paul and I first met in our college cafeteria. We were both having coffee and reading books when we started talking. That simple chat turned into a strong and special connection. Paul was always calm and kind. He would listen to me with so much care, and I felt safe and comfortable with him. Over time, we became close friends, and I realized I couldn't imagine my life without him. One day, under some beautiful blooming trees, Paul shyly gave me a ring and said, "I want to be with you forever." His words were so honest and sweet. I nodded yes with tears in my eyes. Since the day we got married, we've shared true happiness together. When our son Andrew was born, Paul cried with joy and softly said, "He's our treasure." Andrew is full of energy and loves being outside. We go on family picnics every weekend, and watching him run around makes me feel so happy and proud. A little while later, Emma was born. She was fragile and had a health condition from birth. At first, we were very worried, but Paul and I worked together and promised to support her through every challenge. Andrew, her big brother, loves her so much. He always says, "I will protect Emma." Seeing their love for each other brings me so much joy. There's one more person who means a lot to me, my grandmother, Kathleen. She is full of kindness and grace, and I've admired her since I was a little girl. My mother, Emily, divorced my father when I was young. When I was still very young, my mom got divorced and quickly married a man named Brian. They had a daughter together, my half-sister Betty. As my mom focused more on her new family, I started to feel left out. My mom and stepdad gave Betty lots of love and attention, but I often felt ignored. On family shopping trips, Betty would get new shoes, while I was told, "The ones you have are still good." It made me feel like I didn't matter as much. But my grandmother Kathleen always made me feel special. She gave me warm hugs and would say, "Rachel, you are my precious granddaughter." When I felt sad or lonely, I always found comfort at her house. The love I hoped to get from my mom, I often found in my grandma instead. Her home was like a safe place for my heart. Even during big life moments like my wedding and when I had my children, my mom, stepdad, and Betty didn't show much interest. It felt like they came to my wedding just because they had to, not because they wanted to celebrate with me. My mom didn't say anything about my dress or the plans I made, which left me feeling invisible on what should have been a happy day. When my son Andrew was born, my mom still seemed to care more about Betty. She brought Betty to the hospital right after I gave birth, but didn't show much excitement about meeting her new grandson. Betty asked about the baby, but she didn't seem truly interested, just curious, like it didn't really matter to her. I wanted so badly for my mom to see my child with love and pride, but her attention stayed on Betty. I felt lonely and left out, even around my own family. It was like my mom, Brian, and Betty were their own little group, and I didn't belong in it, no matter how much I loved and supported them. It took me a long time to accept this. I thought about it over and over again, trying to make sense of it, but I never really could. In time, I started to step back and look at my family from a different point of view. But through all of this, my grandmother Kathleen stayed by my side. She was truly happy for me. When I told my grandmother Kathleen that I was getting married, she cried happy tears and said, "Congratulations, you made a wonderful choice." Her words touched my heart so deeply, I almost cried too. I could feel how much she truly wanted me to be happy, and her kindness stayed with me. When I introduced Paul to her for the first time, she welcomed him with warmth. She noticed he was a little nervous, so she held his hand and gently said, "Please take good care of Rachel. I'm counting on you." Paul smiled shyly and thanked her with real feeling. In that moment, I could feel how much she loved me and how much trust she was placing in Paul. When Andrew and Emma were born, her joy was beyond anything I expected. She loved them deeply. When Andrew took his first steps, Kathleen cried happy tears and cheered, "Look, he can walk now." Whenever Emma smiled, Kathleen was amazed. She would often say, "Emma is starting to look like her mama." To my kids, she wasn't just a great grandmother. She was a constant source of love and comfort. Kathleen loved Wellington, and her house was full of bright Wellington paintings and decorations, making every room feel peaceful and warm. After my grandfather passed away, she chose to live on her own, holding on to their memories. She used the money he left her to buy a small house in Wellington, a special place full of their shared memories. The cottage sat right by the beach, calm and beautiful. After I got married, I often took my family there to visit Kathleen. She loved to cook, and her lemon pie was the best I've ever tasted. Some of my favorite memories are of us standing together in the kitchen, surrounded by the sweet smell of sugar and butter. Paul loved the peaceful feeling there too. He would smile and say, "This place feels like heaven." Andrew would run happily along the beach, and Emma loved sitting on Kathleen's lap, listening to her magical stories. Kathleen's love for my family was so clear in everything she did. One day, she told me, "I plan to leave this cottage to you." My heart filled with joy. That house held so many beautiful memories, and I hope to create even more happy moments there with my own children. But those peaceful, happy days began to fade when Kathleen became seriously ill. I gave all my time and energy to taking care of Kathleen, but at the same time, looking after Emma's health was very hard. I didn't know it then, but while I was going through all of this, my mom Emily and my stepdad Brian pretended to care about Kathleen, while secretly planning to take her property for themselves. Losing Kathleen broke my heart. But what shocked me even more was what I learned from her will. Kathleen had left me not only the cottage in Wellington, but also a large amount of money. When I found out, I cried so hard. I felt like I could hear her gentle voice saying, "Rachel, the cottage and everything else is for you and your family." But my mom and stepdad didn't agree. They were angry and said it wasn't fair that I inherited everything. They kept pushing me to give the cottage to Kathleen's brother, Jeffrey. I wanted to say no, but I was completely worn out, both in body and mind, from taking care of Emma and trying to manage her medical bills. I didn't have the strength to fight back. So, against my wishes, I gave in. I handed the keys to Jeffrey and said quietly, We'll handle the paperwork later, once things calm down. Losing the cottage, a place so full of love and memories, hurt deeply. But I forced myself to focus on Emma. With my husband and kids beside me, I still felt like I had enough happiness in my life. But a few weeks after Kathleen passed, something terrible happened. There had been warnings about a hurricane coming, but no one expected it to be so strong. The storm was much worse than anyone thought. Heavy rain and floods hit our town hard. That day, I stayed home with Emma. She was still very fragile, and I didn't want to risk taking her out in the bad weather. Meanwhile, Paul and Andrew went to a nearby store to buy supplies. Even though the streets were starting to flood, Paul smiled and said, "We'll be back soon," and Andrew added happily, "I'll get snacks Emma likes." They waved goodbye. I had no idea those would be the last words I'd ever hear from them. On their way home, they tried to cross a road that had flooded. Suddenly, a strong wave of water swept their car away. I saw the news and felt like my heart stopped. I didn't want to believe it. I rushed to the police station, begging them to find Paul and Andrew. After hours of waiting and praying, an officer looked at me with sadness and said, "I'm sorry. Paul and Andrew were taken by the floodwaters." My world fell apart. The pain was more than I could bear. I cried like I never had before. Emma was crying too, but I told myself I had to stay strong for her. Even though my heart was breaking, I had to take care of everything, like planning the funeral. I chose the date called Friends and Family and started getting ready to say goodbye to Paul and Andrew. During all of this, I called my mom to tell her what happened. After a short pause, she replied with no emotion, "That's unfortunate. When is the funeral?" "Next Sunday," I said. "I can't come," she answered. "Why not?" I asked. "I have a trip to Wellington planned. You know Betty lost her job and broke up with her boyfriend, right? Brian and I are taking her on a vacation to cheer her up. It's already booked and hard to cancel now." I was shocked. She was choosing a vacation over the funeral of her son-in-law and grandson. "Mom, are you serious?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Rachel, we can't just change our plans. Betty is looking forward to this trip," she said. "Family died. Paul and Andrew are gone. And you're going on vacation? Don't overreact, Rachel. I understand you're upset, but we have our plans." I couldn't say another word. My heart sank. She had chosen a trip for Betty over being there for me at one of the hardest times of my life. I ended the call, feeling completely alone and betrayed. My mom had always favored Betty, but I never thought she could be this cold. On the day of the funeral, I did my best not to cry. I gently placed Paul's and Andrew's favorite flowers on their caskets, saying a silent goodbye. Many people came, including Paul's friends and family, and that gave me a small bit of comfort. Even my father, who I hadn't seen in years, and his side of the family showed up. Their presence and kind words helped ease the pain just a little. But my mom, stepdad, and Betty weren't there. I knew they were already at the airport. I could picture them sitting in the lounge, laughing and waiting for their flight, acting like nothing had happened. The thought made me so angry, I could barely stand it. It was heartless and unforgivable. I was drowning in grief from losing Paul and Andrew, and now I also felt a deep anger building inside me. After the funeral, I decided to check the security cameras at the Wellington cottage. When I saw them there, walking around casually like everything was fine, I knew what I had to do. I was determined not to let them get away with how they treated me. I called the police and reported them for trespassing at the cottage. Soon after, they were forced to leave. When the police arrived and asked them to leave, they were completely shocked. They tried to argue, saying the cottage was supposed to belong to my grandmother's brother, Jeffrey. But the officers already knew I was the legal owner, and I hadn't given them permission to stay there. My family was surprised and confused. In the end, they had no choice but to stay in a nearby hotel. Not long after they were removed, my mother called me, furious. "What have you done, Rachel? Why would you do something like this?" she shouted. I was stunned by her anger and couldn't believe she had the nerve to be upset. Once again, she was only thinking of herself. "I don't understand why this is considered trespassing," she went on. "We're family. It shouldn't be a problem for us to visit." That cottage is supposed to be Jeffrey's anyway. Hearing her say that made my heart grow cold. All the pain and betrayal from the past came rushing back. She kept defending herself, acting like they had done nothing wrong. She never once apologized. "Mom, please calm down and listen," I said, trying to stay calm. "When you entered that cottage, the legal paperwork hadn't been finished. That means the cottage was still mine. I didn't know that. I can't believe you would accuse your own family of trespassing. Do you know how expensive this hotel is?" she snapped. I stayed strong. "If we were truly family, you would have gone to the funeral of your son-in-law and grandson. That should have been your priority. But you didn't show up. I don't consider people who ignore something that important as family." For a moment, she had nothing to say. I took that chance to let out everything I had been holding in. "I don't consider you my family anymore," I said clearly, and I ended the call. Later, I heard that my mom, stepdad, and Betty ended their vacation early and flew home. They had probably planned to stay at the cottage for a few more days, but now they had to spend money on hotel rooms instead. Honestly, it felt fair. After everything they had done, they finally had to deal with some consequences. Even after returning home, my mother kept blaming me for everything. Despite how she had ignored my pain and acted selfishly, she kept sending me angry messages saying, "You really did something awful by turning on your own family." I chose to ignore her messages. Over time, her words stopped having any effect on me. My heart had completely shut off from them. Paul had always been the main person earning money in our family. He made sure we lived a comfortable life. For years, I had sent money to my parents, especially because my mom often asked for help and my stepdad sometimes demanded it. Deep down, I never felt I had to help them. It just felt like it was expected of me. But after losing Paul and Andrew, and especially after my mom chose not to attend the funeral, my feelings toward her changed completely. Her choice to go on a vacation instead of being there to mourn with us was something I couldn't forgive. I felt deeply betrayed, and my heart turned cold toward her. Because of that, I decided to stop sending them money. The next month, when my mom realized the money wasn't coming anymore, she called me in a panic. Every time the phone rang, I felt uneasy, but I stayed calm. "Why haven't you sent the money?"
"What's going on?" she asked.
I took a deep breath and answered quietly but firmly, "I'm not sending you any more money." There was a long silence, and then she started yelling. "Why would you do this? You know we depend on your support. How are we supposed to live without it?" Her voice was full of fear and anger, but I knew I was making the right choice. I felt sure of myself, even as she shouted. "I'm done helping," I said. "You didn't even come to the funeral. I don't see any reason to keep supporting people who chose a trip to Wellington over mourning my husband and son." She was furious. "You're so cold. How can you say something so cruel? You have no heart," she shouted. But I didn't feel anything anymore. Her words no longer touched me. "That's fine," I said. "I don't think there's anything more to say." Then I ended the call for the last time. I stood by my decision to cut all ties with them. After that, my mother and stepfather, who had been living off my financial support along with their pensions, had to survive on just their pensions. According to relatives, Betty still hadn't found a new job after being fired and was still living at home. Money was tight. They even had trouble paying for basic things like electricity and water. The family that once went out to eat often was now eating simple, cheap meals. My mother sighed as she picked out discounted groceries, and my stepfather struggled to find a job because of his age. The happy, busy home they once had turned quiet and heavy. But I didn't feel sorry for them. I didn't feel responsible for fixing their problems anymore. My peace of mind became my top priority. Soon, their behavior became more desperate. They started coming to my house without warning, begging for money. When I refused, they would yell and cause trouble. I was scared of their surprise visits, so I changed my locks and installed security cameras. Every time the doorbell rang, I felt nervous. I often pretended I wasn't home. I didn't feel safe in my own house. Every small sound at night made me anxious, and I began losing sleep. One day, my mother tried to sneak into my house again. I called the police right away. When they arrived, she was arrested on the spot. That incident gave her a criminal record. Both my mother and stepfather lost the trust of others. With criminal records, they couldn't get jobs or take out bank loans. Without income, their financial problems got worse. Even with all of that happening, I didn't feel any sympathy. My heart was completely closed off to them. All I could do was watch quietly as they faced the results of their choices. When people heard that my mother and stepfather had skipped my husband's and son's funeral to go on a vacation, they were shocked. Relatives talked about it, and many criticized them. They became distant from others, losing the support of both family and friends. My mother tried to apologize several times, but it didn't matter. My heart stayed cold. I had no plans to accept my mother's apologies. I chose to look ahead instead of thinking about all the pain I had been through. I promised myself that I would no longer sacrifice my own well-being just to meet my family's expectations. Most importantly, I had someone special to protect, Emma. Knowing how strong she was, I knew I had to be strong for her too. Cutting ties with my family and stopping the financial support felt like the right choice. I was ready to let go of the past. My connection to my mother, stepfather, and stepsister no longer meant anything to me. In my heart, those relationships were over. I had given too much for too long, and now it was time to choose myself. From that day forward, I decided to stand on my own. Emma and I moved into the cottage in Wellington. In a room filled with warm sunshine and a peaceful view of the sea, we began a new chapter of our lives. Little by little, Emma began to get stronger. As I cared for her, I also started to find hope again. Being free from my family and all the pain they caused made me feel light and free. Even though I had cried a lot, those tears now felt like part of healing, not pain. Sometimes, as Emma and I walked along the beach, I would think about everything we had gone through. Our hard journey made me appreciate our new life even more. As Emma smiled again and found her own strength, I saw that we were both healing. Since choosing to live bravely, our lives became calmer and more peaceful. I could feel a new future slowly opening up for us. Letting go of my family helped me find myself again. My bond with Emma grew stronger, and I started to enjoy life once more. In those moments, I felt truly thankful for the decision I had made to leave the past behind. I looked forward to a future full of freedom and new beginnings. Feeling proud of how far I had come, I promised myself to keep moving forward, one steady step at a time. My name is Lauren, and I really don't get along with my parents. What I hate the most is how much they care about what others think. They act nice to me just to look good in front of people. It seems like their reputation is the most important thing to them. Because of this, they were super strict with me at home, always nagging me about my manners and how I spoke. Of course, I pushed back, but they never listened to what I had to say. In the end, all they cared about was making sure I acted polite so others would think well of them. I kept telling myself this was normal, but I kept wondering how much longer I had to put up with it. Would I feel like this forever? I often thought about running away. When I was a kid, I felt trapped by these thoughts, but things changed a bit when my younger sister, Julie, was born while I was in elementary school. Julie was cuter, and naturally my parents started paying more attention to her. All their love and focus shifted to Julie, and I found it easier to keep my distance from them. I thought this would make things better for me, but their obsession with appearances didn't go away. I realized this fully in my third year of high school when I mentioned wanting to get a job. Ever since I was little, I had dreamed of leaving home, and getting a job felt like the perfect chance. But then my father said something that caught me off guard. "You're going to university." I was shocked by how firm he was. I thought that since they were so focused on Julie now, they wouldn't care much about what I wanted to do. Maybe he was thinking about my future a little, so I asked, "Why should I go to university?" I had a bit of hope, but my dad shut it down quickly. He said, "You need a proper education to marry into a good family." That's when it hit me. Everything they did was for this reason. They were planning to use my marriage to make their own lives easier. But I don't want that. I want to work and be independent. I argued back, "Then will you pay for me to move out?" But I went quiet because I knew I didn't have enough money to leave. My parents gave me a decent allowance because they cared about what others thought, but it wasn't enough to cover moving costs. Plus, my high school didn't allow part-time jobs, so I couldn't save up money on my own. My father knew this, which is why he said that. When I couldn't reply, he laughed and said, "Do you know how much we've spent on you? Can you pay that back?" I was speechless. "If you can't pay it back, you're going to university," he added. I couldn't argue with that. Looking at it differently, though, it meant I could go to college for free. Even if my parents wanted to push me into marriage, they couldn't make me do it without considering my feelings. So, I decided maybe going to university wasn't such a bad idea. I could study, then get a job, and leave home. I agreed to go to college. I enrolled in a local university, but living on my own wasn't allowed. My father didn't care what I studied. He told me, "You don't have to pay tuition, but you have to contribute to household expenses. I'll let you work part-time." He set the amount for living expenses at about $1,200. I wanted to study hard, but my father didn't understand that. I ended up working part-time between classes, trying to make enough to cover the expenses. $1,200 was a lot for me, especially with class reports and exams taking up most of my time. I only had a few hours a day to work, but I somehow managed to earn the money. I told myself I couldn't waste this chance. I worked hard, sacrificing sleep to balance both school and work. In the end, my efforts paid off. I graduated and got a job offer from a real estate company. Finally, I thought I could leave home. But things didn't turn out the way I hoped. When I told my father about the job, he said, "You can take the job, but you're not allowed to live alone." I asked why, and he said, "What if you end up with some strange man? You can't move out until you get married." I tried to argue, saying I'd be fine, but he wouldn't budge. "Unless you can pay back all the money for your tuition, you're staying here," he said. I couldn't believe it. How was I supposed to pay all that back? I had given everything I had. I earned money from my part-time jobs and gave it to my family, so living alone was out of the question. My father laughed loudly when I realized this. It was clear everything was going according to his plan. He had made sure I contributed my earnings to the household from the start, knowing I wouldn't have enough to leave. In the end, my life was unfolding exactly the way he wanted. I wondered if I would ever be able to stand up to him. With these thoughts, I began my first job as an adult, but a new problem quickly came up. Right after I started working, my father suddenly retired, saying it was because of back pain. But I knew that was just an excuse. He didn't want to work anymore and planned to rely on my income. Even though it frustrated me, he was still my family, so I couldn't just abandon him. At one point, I seriously thought about cutting ties with my family and even researched ways to do it. But I realized there's no real way to completely break away from family. No matter what happens, a parent is still a parent, and that's not something you can easily let go of. Still, I didn't give up on my dream of leaving home. I started saving money, hoping I could eventually support myself. But my father didn't miss a thing. One day, a few years after I started working, I came home to find a cake on the table. I asked what was going on, and Julie excitedly told me, "I got into my dream school." I congratulated her, and she was so happy, clapping her hands in joy. I was happy for her too, but then my father said something that changed everything. "You'll pay for Julie's college, right?" he asked. I was shocked. "Me?" I replied.
"Of course," he said.
"I can't work because of my back." His words were irresponsible because anyone could see he was fine. But I couldn't afford to make him angry, and I knew he didn't have any money. If I didn't pay for Julie's tuition, she wouldn't be able to go to college. My father knew this, and it gave him control over me. For him, it was the perfect plan. He'd secured Julie's education and stopped me from becoming independent. Julie is a sweet girl, and I'm grateful to her because, when we were younger, she helped me keep a relationship with our parents. She may not realize it, but I appreciated her. So, I agreed to pay for her tuition, even though it meant I wouldn't be able to move out for a while. One night, I was drinking alone, venting my frustrations about my father. Meanwhile, Julie happily started her university journey. To cover her expenses, I worked even harder than before. Day after day, I kept this up until I was completely exhausted. One day, so tired from everything, I accidentally left my wallet at the entrance when I got home. When I went to work, I didn't realize I had forgotten my wallet until I got to the station and tried to go through the ticket gates. Oh no, my wallet! I suddenly remembered pulling it out at the entrance when I left the house. I quickly called home, and my mom told me that Julie had picked it up and was bringing it to the station on her way to university. I started running to meet her. When I got to the station, I saw Julie at a deli nearby, holding something in her hand. "Julie, did you bring my wallet?" I asked. "Yes, here it is," she said, handing it to me. I immediately checked inside and found everything in place: my employee badge, a corporate card, and an IC card. It would have been a huge problem if I had lost any of those. Thankfully, no money had been used, and I was relieved. "Thank you so much," I told Julie before rushing back to the station. Thanks to her, I made it to work on time. I told myself to be more careful from now on. Later, on my way home, I bought a cake to thank Julie. She enjoyed the cake, and I felt good for showing my appreciation. But at that moment, I didn't realize what was coming next. A few days later, Anna from accounting came to talk to me. She's a senior colleague who's been very helpful, giving me clothes and makeup when I was struggling financially. So, I thought she had a personal matter to discuss. But Anna led me to a quiet spot and said, "I wanted to check something. Have you used the company card for anything other than work recently?" The company card is for managing business expenses. Since I'm in sales, I have one, and any personal use would show up right away because it's tied to the corporate account. I was confused and worried because I couldn't think of a time I had used it for anything other than work. As I tried to remember, Anna continued, "There's a record of your card being used at a deli for a bottle of water. Do you remember that?" I thought hard, then it hit me. It was the day I had forgotten my wallet at home. Julie had briefly had my wallet. I always carry my wallet with me at work, so I started thinking the only person who could have used the company card was Julie. I asked Anna, "Do you know the date the card was used?" I didn't want to believe it was Julie, and if the date didn't match, then she wouldn't be involved. Maybe I had accidentally used the card myself without realizing it. I hoped that was the case, but things didn't turn out that way. The date matched the day I left my wallet at home. "Do you remember anything?" Anna asked. I quickly blurted out, "I'm sorry, I think I used it by mistake," thinking it was my IC card. I sometimes buy water at the station deli. Anna accepted my explanation, and I immediately paid back the amount. Despite my awkward excuse, Anna was kind and said, "I've done something similar myself." Even though she was understanding, I still felt anxious about it happening again. To prevent any future issues, I made a request to Anna. "It might be a hassle, but can you help me keep an eye on this?" "Are you sure you're okay with that, Lauren?" she asked. "Yes, I don't want to make the same mistake again," I replied. Anna agreed to help, and the company avoided making it a big deal. But I knew if something like this happened again, it would be treated as a serious problem. So I decided to take extra precautions. This incident became a turning point for me. I had always believed Julie was a good girl. After all, she was my father's favorite, and she never rebelled against him. But after this, I started to think maybe Julie was just pretending to be good in front of everyone, including me. Her smile suddenly seemed unsettling. I already knew my parents were trying to use me for their own benefit, especially my father, and I had always been cautious around them. But now, I realized I needed to be careful around Julie too. Living with my parents, and Julie started to feel even more uncomfortable. I had always wanted to move out, but now that desire was stronger than ever. I decided to talk to my boyfriend, Walter, about it. "Really? Then why don't you marry me and move in with me?" Walter said casually. "What?" I was caught off guard. "Why don't we just get married and live together? I'm a civil servant, so your parents would probably approve of me," Walter continued. He had a point. Walter and I were college classmates, and we had been dating for over 6 years. I had thought a little about marriage, but my family situation is far from normal, so it wasn't something I had seriously considered yet. When I was able to casually talk about marriage, Walter already knew my family wasn't normal, and he had always been there to listen to me. Still, he was serious about marrying me. That's when I decided to marry Walter. But there wasn't much time to enjoy the happiness because there were a lot of issues to solve, the biggest one being my father. I had no idea if he would agree to the marriage, and I didn't know how to even bring up the conversation with him. Time passed quickly, and about 5 months went by before I realized I really needed to talk to him. Just when I was thinking about how to approach it, a small argument with my father turned into a bigger fight. "Don't make me say it again," he yelled. "You need to accept this man I've chosen for you." "I don't want to," I replied. "I have a boyfriend." "A boyfriend?
Who is he?" my father asked.
"He's my classmate from college. He's a civil servant now." My father went quiet, thinking for a moment. I took the opportunity to continue. "He's willing to offer a decent amount for the engagement gifts, and he comes from a respectable family." My father hesitated. I saw this as my chance and pushed the conversation forward. "How much would satisfy you?" "Maybe $65,000, he said, which shocked me. It was a lot of money. When I talked to Walter about it, he agreed to pay the $65,000. Thanks to that, I was finally able to move out. Once we settled the money, everything else went smoothly. I quickly arranged the move and booked a moving service for Sunday. While packing, Julie came up to me and said, "Make sure you pay for my tuition." "I know," I replied, but I added, "There's something I've been wanting to ask you. Did you use my car to shop before?" "Oh, you noticed that?" Julie said without any guilt. I had wanted to ask her about it for a long time, but the right moment never seemed to come. Now that I had the courage to bring it up, her lack of remorse really bothered me. "Using someone else's card without permission is a crime," I said, frustrated. "We're family, so it's not a big deal," Julie responded, still showing no guilt. I was furious. "Make sure to deposit your tuition in the account," I said firmly. "But this is the last time." "What?" Julie exclaimed. "Once I leave this house, do whatever you want," I said. Julie just snorted and walked away. By the time the move was done, it was getting late. I went to the living room to say goodbye, and my father was waiting for me. "Where's the money?" he asked. "All you care about is money," I replied, leaving it on the table. "My dream was to marry you off to a wealthy family and make a profit." "Are you happy now?" he said, looking at me. I didn't answer and left. "I've already contributed a lot to this household over the years," I said. "Yeah, now it's up to Julie's future husband," my father replied, laughing with satisfaction. The thought that he might show up at my new home asking for money one day annoyed me, but I figured I could just turn him away if that happened. Afterward, we had our last meal together as a family, but Julie wasn't there. She had gone out with friends. It was a relief not to see her face. After dinner, I got ready to leave. As I stepped out the front door, I unexpectedly ran into Julie. "Still here, big sis?" she asked. "Oh, right, I need to give this back to you." She pulled out my company card. I quickly checked my wallet. It was too late to panic. "I took it when I went into your room," she said casually. I bit my lip in frustration, knowing the card had already been used. Julie continued, "I've paid for food and drinks for about 150 people with that card, so take care of the rest." She started rattling off excuses about reunions and going out for all-you-can-drink parties. She even proudly mentioned that she had been mindful of the card's limit and chose a $80 course, as if that made it better. I was furious.
"Who are you?"
"We're strangers once I leave this house for good," I said sharply. "Oh, about the tuition," Julie began again. "Talk to Dad about the tuition," I said firmly, and then I left. I started a new life with Walter in our new home. Nothing major had changed. I kept my job even after getting married, so the only real differences were my last name and where I lived. But for me, moving out was the biggest change. I finally felt free, a feeling I had never experienced before. I enjoyed my life with Walter and hoped this happiness would last forever. About 5 months later, Julie suddenly showed up at my workplace, causing a scene. "I know you're here. Come out already," she yelled at the company reception. I rushed to the front, embarrassed. "Julie, what are you doing here?" I asked. "You tricked me," she yelled, holding up her bank book angrily. "They told me the tuition hasn't been paid." "Explain yourself." "I definitely deposited the money. Did you check properly?" I replied, confused. "If they say it hasn't been paid, then it's not there. Check your bank book again." "Julie, you're not a child anymore. Don't treat me like I'm the one at fault," I added firmly, tired of the drama. I have a job offer. I'm a responsible adult. Julie shouted. I sighed and calmly replied, Look here, there's a deposit of $10,000, right? I made that deposit, but it's been withdrawn since, hasn't it? You're the one who took it, aren't you? Julie looked confused and defensive. Are you sure it wasn't you? She asked. I don't have the card, so I couldn't have done it. Didn't you say before that you paid for 150 people's meals using the card? You mentioned having a reunion. Have you forgotten? I questioned her. Julie's face turned pale as she stammered. That time it should have been paid with a company card, not your card. She still didn't seem to understand, so I explained further. The company card normally takes money from the company's account. That's true. But after you used my company card without my permission, I changed the account it withdraws from, just in case. Julie looked shocked. How could you do that? Yes, you used the company card, but I changed the account to one of my own. This way, if someone else uses it by mistake, it doesn't affect the company. So, when you paid for those meals, the money came from my personal account. Here's proof, $10,000 was taken out because you used it, I explained. But what about the university tuition? Julie demanded. I deposited the money, as I was told to. It's not my responsibility anymore. Figure it out yourself, I said firmly. At this point, Julie started causing a scene again. Before long, the police arrived, and an officer restrained her. It's a mistake. I didn't do anything wrong. Julie screamed. You said yourself that you used my company card. What's mistaken about that?
I asked.
But it's your fault for not warning me, she protested. I warned you the first time you used it. It's a crime, I reminded her. Eventually, Julie was taken away by the police for questioning. I didn't file a report, because I didn't need to. A video of Julie causing the scene at my workplace had been posted on social media, and it spread quickly. As a result, Julie was disciplined by her university and expelled. Worried about their reputation, my parents took Julie and moved out of state, hoping to escape the scandal by starting over in a new place. My parents moved to a new place where nobody knew about the trouble they had caused. Their plan was to find a husband for Julie and get money from his family. But since both my parents and Julie are difficult people, their plan didn't go smoothly. I soon heard they ran into problems with the other family. Lauren, you're the only one we can rely on. Julie got into trouble with her partner, and they're demanding compensation. My father messaged me. It had only been a month since they moved, and they were already causing issues. I realized that this kind of trouble would probably continue. I replied, I'm sorry, but if you come to my place, I'll have to file a police report about what Julie did. After that, all communication stopped suddenly. Even though they didn't have money or jobs, I didn't hear from them again. I started to feel a little worried, so I hired a detective agency to quietly check on them. It turned out that all four, my parents and Julie, were working at a logistics warehouse. The warehouse was owned by the same company Julie had problems with, so it seemed they were working to pay off their debt. Knowing they were working hard in a dim warehouse gave me some relief. At least they were earning enough to cover their debts and living expenses, so I decided to let them handle their own situation. Meanwhile, I've been enjoying happy, fulfilling days with Walter. My work is going well, and my sales performance is improving. With my family out of the picture, my savings are growing, and everything in my life feels stable. Things are going so well that I sometimes feel a bit anxious about the future, but for now, I just want to enjoy the happiness I've worked hard to achieve with Walter. I grew up in a small town called Stone Ridge Estate. Our 3-story house wasn't fancy, but it was home. My parents were both teachers at the local school. They made sure my sister Alyssa and I always had what we needed, even though we didn't have much money. They were amazing at making a teacher's salary stretch, and somehow, they always made it work. Alyssa was my older sister, my best friend, and everything I wasn't. While I loved spending time with books and sketching quietly, Alyssa was full of energy and always lit up every room she walked into. I still remember us as kids, climbing the big oak tree in our backyard and pretending we were explorers or princesses. Life was simpler then, before things started to change as we got older. As we grew up, our differences became clearer. Alyssa was outgoing, talented, and seemed perfect in every way. She wrote poems that made our English teacher cry, acted in every school play, and even found time to shine on the rugby team. Meanwhile, I was quiet and preferred spending my lunch breaks in the library instead of with the crowds in the cafeteria. Our parents never showed favoritism. They were just as proud of Alyssa's big achievements as they were of my good grades and smaller accomplishments. But it was clear that Alyssa was destined for bigger things. When college acceptance letters arrived, it wasn't surprising that Alyssa got into Fresno University, one of the best schools in the state. I'll never forget the day her acceptance letter came. Mom and Dad were overjoyed. "Our baby's going to Fresno." Mom cried, hugging Alyssa tightly. Dad was calling relatives to share the news. Alyssa got into Fresno with a full scholarship, he told everyone. That was when our paths truly started to split. We still loved each other, but life took us in different directions. Alyssa moved to the city to start her new life, while I stayed in our hometown, still living in the house we grew up in, trying to figure out my own path. I never expected that my bond with Alyssa would be tested in a way I couldn't imagine. But one golden ring changed everything, breaking what we had built over the years and making me question everything I thought I knew about family, trust, and forgiveness. Alyssa would call home every week, sharing her success stories and achievements. I'd sit at the kitchen table, watching Mom's face light up with pride as Alyssa talked about her latest accomplishment at Fresno. "Did you hear?" Mom would tell everyone. Alyssa's research paper was published in the university's psychology journal, and she's only a sophomore. Dad would add, and she still has a perfect 5.0 GPA while doing all that extra research. That's our girl. Meanwhile, I spent 3 years after high school working at the local diner, saving money for community college. When I finally started at Stone Ridge Estate Community College, my parents smiled and said, "That's nice, dear." It wasn't Fresno, but it was something. Alyssa was on TV again yesterday, Mom said during dinner one night. They interviewed her about her research on childhood development. She looked so professional. "That's great," I muttered, barely touching my food. I worked hard at school, but getting an A++ in Intro to Business didn't seem to matter compared to Alyssa's published papers and TV appearances. My achievements felt small, like a candle next to her spotlight. After I graduated, reality hit hard. Alyssa had already landed a job at Preston Medical Center and was becoming a rising star in their psychology department. Meanwhile, I was handing out resumes to local businesses and not getting any calls back. That's how I ended up working at Aunt Kate's store as an assistant administrator. She gave me the job with that familiar look of pity I was getting used to. "It's just temporary," she said, showing me around, "until you find something better for someone with a degree." Then everything changed with one phone call. Alyssa called one Friday evening, her voice full of excitement. "Mom, Dad, I met someone," she said on speakerphone. "His name is Sam, and he's a lawyer at Blackwell and Associates. His family owns half the buildings downtown." I watched as Mom and Dad exchanged looks of approval. Of course, Alyssa would find someone as successful as she was. "He's taking me to Rome next month," Alyssa added. "His family has an apartment there. Can you believe it?" "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mom exclaimed, while Dad beamed with pride. I sat there in my old sweatpants, still living in my childhood bedroom and making minimum wage at my aunt's store. The difference between Alyssa and me couldn't have been clearer. Alyssa was a successful psychologist dating a wealthy lawyer, while I was the sister who couldn't seem to get her life on track. "When do we get to meet him?" Mom asked eagerly. "Soon," Alyssa said. "He's taking me to that new French restaurant this weekend, but maybe next week we can come for dinner." I left the kitchen before they could see the tears in my eyes. It's not that I wasn't happy for Alyssa. I was. But every time she succeeded, it felt like it made my failure stand out even more. Every step forward she took seemed to push me 3 steps back. Holidays became all about Alyssa's exciting life. She'd arrive at our parents' house like a celebrity, full of stories about important clients, big therapy breakthroughs, and glamorous dates with Sam. And then the CEO himself thanked me in front of the entire board, she said over Thanksgiving dinner, while I quietly passed the mashed potatoes. "Tell them about the conference in Boston, honey," Mom said proudly. I sat there in my work clothes from the store, still living at home, because minimum wage wasn't enough to afford my own apartment. Even with my aunt's employee discount, I couldn't save enough to move out. Then came the announcement we all saw coming. It was during Christmas dinner, when Alyssa stood up with Sam next to her, both smiling from ear to ear. "We're getting married," she squealed, holding out her hand to show off a stunning gold ring with a sparkling diamond. "It's been in my family for generations," Sam explained. "My great-grandfather gave it to my great-grandmother in 1923. Mom burst into happy tears. Dad opened his best bottle of wine. I smiled, but inside I felt something heavy settle in my stomach. The next few months were all about wedding preparations. Alyssa was always at the house, turning it into a wedding planning zone. Every surface was covered with bridal magazines, color swatches, and guest lists. One Tuesday in early spring, I had a rare day off. I was lying on my bed, reading my old copy of Pride and Prejudice, when I heard Alyssa and Mom talking in the garden below my window. "These roses will be perfect for the reception," Alyssa said. "We should plant more along the fence." "Be careful with your rings, sweetie," Mom said. "Those thorns can catch on it." "You're right," Alyssa replied. "This glove keeps catching on it. I'll just put it here on the bench for now." I went back to reading my book, only half listening to Mom and Alyssa talking about flowers and table decorations. The afternoon sun felt warm through my window, and I was getting to my favorite part of the story when I heard Mom's voice. "We should get more fertilizer if we're planting all these roses. Let's go to the garden center." "Good idea," Alyssa said. "Kayla, we're heading to the store. Be back soon." I mumbled something in response, too caught up in my book to pay much attention. The house felt quiet after they left, except for the sound of birds outside. When they came back, the calm was broken by Alyssa's panicked voice.
Mom.
"The ring, it's gone." I looked up from my book, startled by the commotion. Through my window, I saw Alyssa and Mom searching frantically around the wooden bench, moving gardening tools and flower pots. "It was right here," Alyssa said, her voice rising. I put on the bench. "Don't worry, honey. We'll find it," Mom said, though she sounded worried too. "It has to be here somewhere." They searched every corner of the garden as the sun started to set, but the ring was nowhere to be found. That's when I first noticed the way they looked up at my window, a flicker of suspicion in their eyes. It felt like a chill in the air. With shaky hands, Alyssa called Sam. His voice came through the phone loud and angry. "What do you mean you lost it?" he yelled. "That ring has been in my family for 4 generations. My great-grandmother wore it through 2 world wars." "I'm so sorry," Alyssa cried. "We'll find it. I promise." "You'd better find it," Sam snapped. His tone was so sharp, it made me flinch. "That ring is irreplaceable." When the call ended, Alyssa turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before, angry and accusing. "You took it, didn't you?"
What?
I said, stunned. It felt like a slap. "Alyssa, I was in my room the whole time." "Exactly," she shouted. "You were the only one here." Her mascara was running as she screamed. "You've always been jealous of me." Mom stepped forward, her face stern. "Kayla, if you took the ring, you need to return it right now." "I didn't take anything," I said, my voice shaking. "I swear." "Then you won't mind if we search your room," Dad said, already heading up the stairs. I followed them to my bedroom, feeling helpless as they tore it apart. They went through my drawers, emptied my jewelry box, flipped my mattress, and dumped out my purse. My books were scattered all over the floor, clothes were thrown everywhere, and even my private diary was read, page by page. "It has to be here somewhere," Alyssa muttered, tossing my sweaters onto the floor. The search went on for hours, then days, and eventually a week. Each day, the accusations got worse. "Just admit it," Alyssa cornered me in the kitchen one morning. "We all know you took it because you're jealous. You can't stand that I'm getting married while you can't even get a date." "Alyssa, please."
Look at you, she snapped.
"You're 28, still living with Mom and Dad, and working a pathetic job that Aunt Kate gave you out of pity. You're a loser, Kayla, and you couldn't stand to see me happy." Mom stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. We're going to call the police if you don't return it. Go ahead, I shouted, finally snapping. Call them. I have nothing to hide because I didn't take your precious ring. Each word felt like a knife cutting into me. But the worst part wasn't the accusations or the threats. It was the way they looked at me. They truly believed I was guilty, that I had betrayed my sister out of jealousy. Word spread quickly in our small town. Within days, everyone had heard my parents' version of the story. At the grocery store, neighbors avoided me. At church, people I'd known my whole life suddenly sat in different pews. I was restocking shelves at Aunt Kate's store when I heard her voice behind me. Kayla. Her tone made me freeze. We need to talk. In her small office, she didn't even offer me a seat. Your mother called me this morning, she said. Aunt Kate, please. She held up her hand. I gave you a chance when no one else would, and this is how you repay me? By stealing your sister's engagement ring. I didn't. Clean out your locker and turn in your keys, she said coldly. I won't have a thief working in my store. The walk home felt like a death march. I hoped Mom and Dad would see how much this was ruining my life, that they'd realize I could never do something like this. But when I got home, I found them sitting in the kitchen. Aunt Kate fired me, I said quietly. My voice was barely a whisper. Mom didn't even look up from her coffee. Pack your things.
What?
You heard your mother, Dad said. We want you out by tomorrow morning. The room started spinning. You're kicking me out? Where am I supposed to go?
I asked.
Maybe you should have thought about that before stealing from your sister, Mom said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were colder than I'd ever seen them. You've brought shame to this family, Kayla. I can't even face my friends anymore. I'm your daughter, I whispered. No daughter of mine would do what you've done. Her words cut deep, sharp as broken glass. You have until morning. I stumbled upstairs in a daze, pulling my old gym bag from a closet. How do you pack your entire life into one bag? What parts of yourself do you take? I started with clothes, enough for a week, maybe 2. One pair of sensible shoes. My laptop, wrapped in a sweater. Then came the harder choices. The books that had been my friends when I had no one else. Pride and Prejudice, Alyssa Eyre, Little Women, stories of women who found their way in tough times. Tears wouldn't stop falling. These walls had seen my first steps, heard my first words. This room had been my safe space through every hard moment in my life. Now it was just another place where I wasn't welcome. My phone buzzed with messages from old friends. I can't believe you'd do this.
How could you?
Don't contact me again. Sitting on my stripped bed, surrounded by the pieces of my life, I realized there was nothing left for me in Stone Ridge Estate. Every bridge was burned, every door closed. Whatever I was going to become, it wouldn't happen here. I had to leave, not just this house, but this town, these memories, and this life that had turned into a prison of blame and distrust. Somewhere out there, I had to believe, was a place where I could start over. A place where no one knew me as the sister who stole the ring, the daughter who betrayed her family, or the girl who wasn't good enough. At 2 a.m., staring at my phone's contact list, I remembered Elizabeth. We'd been close in college before life pulled us in different directions. My hands shook as I dialed her number, hoping she still used it. Kayla? Her voice was groggy. What's wrong? The whole story spilled out of me between sobs. When I was done, there was a long silence. I have a spare room, Elizabeth finally said. I'm in Seattle now. It's not much, but it's yours if you want it. I checked my bank account. $415.22. Just enough for a one-way bus ticket to Washington and maybe a meal or 2. When can you come? Elizabeth asked.
Tomorrow, I said.
I have to leave tomorrow, I whispered. The bus ride took 3 days. Most of the time, I just stared out the window, watching the familiar places of my life fade into unknown landscapes. My gym bag sat on my lap, holding everything I owned. It felt like a lifeline. Elizabeth was waiting at the station when I arrived, just like she promised. She hugged me right away, and for the first time in weeks, I felt human again. The store where I work is hiring, she said as we drove to her apartment. It's just retail, but it's something. I started the very next day. The store manager looked at my business degree and my desperate eyes and handed me a name tag. "You're on register too," he said. I threw myself into the job like it was my lifeline. Every shift, every sale, every minute felt like one step further away from Stonebridge Estate and the mess I'd left behind. When my coworkers complained about long hours, I stayed late. When they groaned about rude customers, I handled them with a smile. For months later, I was promoted to floor supervisor. 3 months after that, assistant manager. By 9 months, I was running my own department. "You're different from most people we promote," my district manager said during my review. "You're hungry." He was right. I was hungry, not just for success, but to prove myself. To prove that I could be more than what my family thought I was. The day I signed the lease on my first apartment, I finally felt free. It was small, just a studio with a tiny kitchen, but it was mine. No one could tell me to leave. No one could go through my things. No one could question my right to be there. That same day, I changed my phone number, deleted all my social media accounts, and erased anything that could lead back to Stonebridge Estate. Elizabeth thought I was being extreme, but she didn't argue. "They're still your family," she said once, carefully. "No," I said, unpacking boxes in my new place. "Family believes in you.
Family stands by you."
They stopped being my family the day they chose not to believe me. At night, lying in my new bed in my new life, I sometimes wondered about them. Was Alyssa married now? Did Mom still garden? Did Dad still read the paper every morning at the kitchen table? But wondering was dangerous. Wondering led to doubting, and doubting pulled me back to that dark place where I questioned everything, even myself. I focused on work, building a new life, and becoming someone who couldn't be ignored or cast aside. Someone who didn't need anyone's approval. Someone strong enough to survive being erased from her own family story. Even though I tried to move forward, there were nights when curiosity got the best of me. On those nights, I'd ask Elizabeth to check Alyssa's social media on her phone. "She got married," Elizabeth told me one evening, scrolling through pictures. "Big white dress, church wedding. Your parents look happy in the photos." I nodded, pretending it didn't hurt.
But it felt like a knife in my chest.
A year later, Elizabeth told me she's pregnant. She showed me a photo of Alyssa cradling her belly, Sam's hand resting over hers. She looked radiant. Years passed this way. I built my new life in Seattle while catching glimpses of my old one through Elizabeth's phone. I watched my family's life go on without me. Pictures and posts that never mentioned the daughter who is gone, the sister who is missing. Then one day, everything changed. Elizabeth called me, her voice breathless. "Kayla, you need to see this." She sent me a screenshot of Alyssa's latest post. "To my sister Kayla, I'm sorry. I was wrong. If anyone knows where she is, please help me find her. I need to make this right. Please share this post." I stared at the words until they blurred.
"It's probably some kind of trick," I said.
"I don't think so," Elizabeth said softly. "Look at the comments. Your parents are there, too. They're begging you to come home." My hands shook as I read their comments. "Mom, please come home, sweetheart.
"We need to talk to you."
Dad, we made a terrible mistake. Please give us a chance." After 5 years of silence, their words didn't feel real. But there was something genuine in their desperation. I dialed the old house number, half expecting it to be disconnected. Mom answered on the first ring. "Hello." Her voice hadn't changed. "It's me," I said quietly. There was a sharp intake of breath, then, "Kayla." "Oh God, Kayla." I could hear her crying and calling for Dad. Their voices tumbled over each other. "Please come home."
"We need to see you," they said.
"There's something you need to know." "I can come next weekend," I heard myself say. The drive back to Stonebridge Estate was the longest of my life. Each mile brought back memories I had tried to bury. When I arrived, the town looked exactly the same, as if nothing had changed while I'd been gone. Alyssa's car was in the driveway. My heart pounded as I pulled up. I walked up the familiar path to the front door. They were all waiting in the living room. Mom, Dad, and Alyssa. 5 years had changed them, too. Mom's hair was grayer, Dad's seemed smaller, and Alyssa Alyssa was holding a sleeping little boy, about 5 years old, on her lap. "We found it," Mom said, her voice trembling. "The ring." "We found it." Dad stepped forward. "We were replanting the roses last week, and there it was tangled in the roots. Right where I knocked it off the bench that day," Alyssa finished, tears streaming down her face. "The ring fell, and then we covered it with soil while planting. It's been there all this time, growing deeper with the roses." The truth hit us all at once, breaking something inside each of us. The living room filled with raw, uncontrollable sobbing. Mom collapsed into Dad's arms, her whole body shaking. Dad's usual calm finally broke, and tears streamed down his face. Alyssa fell to her knees, crying so hard it woke the sleeping boy in her arms. And me? After 5 years of holding it all in, trying to be strong, trying to survive, I finally let go. The tears came in waves, years of pain and loneliness pouring out in deep, gut-wrenching sobs. "I'm so sorry, Kayla," Alyssa choked out between gasps. "I was horrible to you, cruel, unforgivable. I let my fear and Sam's anger cloud my judgment. I chose to believe the worst about my own sister." Mom reached for my hand but stopped, unsure. "We failed you as parents," she whispered through her tears. "We should have believed you, protected you. Instead, Her voice broke, and she couldn't finish. "Please," Alyssa pleaded, her voice desperate.
Tell us how to make this right.
"I'll do anything. We all will." I looked at them. These people who had once been my whole world, then became my worst nightmare.
And now?
Now, I didn't know what they were. "I can't just pretend the last 5 years didn't happen," I said, wiping my eyes. "You didn't just accuse me. You condemned me. You turned the whole town against me, threw me out with nothing but a gym bag and nowhere to go. What if?" Mom hesitated, then continued. "What if we saw someone? A family therapist. Someone who could help us rebuild what we broke. Once a month," Dad added quickly, his voice thick with emotion. "As long as it takes." I looked at the little boy on the couch. My nephew, I realized. He had Alyssa's nose and Sam's dark hair. 5 years of his life had passed, and I hadn't been there. "I'm not moving back to Stonebridge Estate," I said firmly. "I have a life in Seattle now, a good job and friends who stood by me when no one else would." "We understand," Alyssa said. "We don't deserve to have you back in our lives. But if you're willing to try, even just a little." It took me 4 months to agree to visit for the first time. Thanksgiving. I brought Elizabeth with me for support. Dinner was awkward, full of careful conversations and topics no one dared to bring up. But it was a start. Dr. Brianna, our family therapist, helps us talk about the hard stuff. In her office, we talk about trust, betrayal, expectations, and how damaging assumptions can be. Sometimes we leave those sessions angry or hurt, with old wounds reopened. But little by little, we're learning how to listen to each other again. Alyssa's son, Liam, is the easiest part. 5-year-old don't hold grudges or remember the mistakes adults make. To him, I'm just Aunt Kayla, the one who brings him books from Seattle and teaches him to draw. His love is pure and simple, like a bridge connecting who we were to who we might become. The roses still bloom in Mom's garden, even the ones that grew around the ring for 5 years. Sometimes I look at them and think about how truth, like that ring, can get buried under layers of assumptions and blame. But truth, like roses, will eventually find its way to the surface. I'm not the same person who left Stonebridge Estate with nothing but a gym bag and a broken heart. They're not the same people who cast me out. We're all learning that healing, like tending a garden, takes time, patience, and care. Some days are harder than others, but we keep trying.